Bernd Lucke.
Thank you, Bernd Lucke, for the ECR, please.
Guten Abend, Herr Kommissar, und vielen Dank, dass Sie...
Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner. Thank you very much for being here for this exchange of views. I would like to ask a bit more about the country-by-country reporting and what you envisage by that. You said that you'd adopted a fairly cautious version of this, which would be recommended in the first interest. It wouldn't be public. It would be restricted to companies with a turnover of over 750 million euros. I would like you please to explain why you have chosen this definition. Why have you decided to differentiate on the basis of this 750 million euros turnover? And I'd like to know whether you think that that is going to be conducive to a level playing field and fair competition. A further question I'd like to put to you is this. If this delimitation line is established, there will be companies which generate higher turnovers and lower ones. Will the ones with a higher turnover not possibly restructure their company, break up their company into several independent subsidiaries, which would therefore not be required to be entered in the country-by-country reports? I'd like to know whether you think that's possible. I also would like to know whether you think that there ought to be some kind of balancing out in the future, because you've said that SMEs have been paying notionally some 30% more tax. Now, should there not be some balancing provision introduced whereby the tax burden is less on the smaller companies, arguably those under 750 million euros turnover? I'd also like to know what you intend in the future regarding your tax avoidance package. Do you intend to differentiate between larger companies and smaller ones? You've suggested this is going to be so in the case of country-by-country reporting, but in the other aspects of the tax avoidance package, will you intend that? Will there be specific recommendations and rules and regulations for smaller companies? Commissioner? Well, thank you. I won't come back to the why of the provisions on the country-by-country report. I think we have arrangements which will be less complex and less costly for country-by-country reporting than if it were done at national level, and I think it should be conducive to greater legal certainty for companies. There will be a single format for returning the information throughout Europe, and this will cover all the operations throughout Europe, so the approach will be coordinated, and I think that this should be effective and appeal to companies. And certainly don't plan to review the 750 million euros. The CDE has recommended that very figure, and therefore the OECD would intend to stick with the OECD figure. I'm not sure about the figures that Mr. Morel was suggesting. I don't know if you were talking about the size of the company, the turnover, or the number of employees. It would be interesting to think about that, because there can be quite a disparity. You can have companies which would be in a different location in the hierarchy, depending, and you might actually want to look at the economic impact in introducing proposed legislation. As to the SMEs, well, it's not up to the Commission to be saying what the Member States ought to be doing. We can't be setting down all the details. If there's less fraud evasion and less aggressive tax planning, we will welcome that. We certainly intend to provide a rule book which the Member States can implement and which we would hope will be properly enforced. The corporate tax base may be reduced on a national level, and this would favour SMEs. As to your question on optimisation and how this will be dealt with in the directive, it doesn't distinguish so far on the basis of size. The approach that we have advocated is not one that is used a great deal by SMEs. It's used more by the bigger companies because it applies more readily to them. Some companies obviously are much more sophisticated in structure. They have services which they could break off or break up. They have legal advisors. They're very well serviced with each and every facility that might be useful to them. But we couldn't probably distinguish in a country-by-country report in that way. That would have to be done in another directive rather than the one we're dealing with. There'd be two separate texts, sir.
Si. Vous avez une, pardon, excusez-moi, monsieur, je suis encore.
I'm terribly sorry. You've got one directive, which is the anti-tax avoidance package, and another directive, which is country by country. In one, there's quite a lot of this, and the other not.